Welcome to the Power of Design podcast, where we have inspiring conversations that explore the intersection of architecture, construction, and real estate, so we can understand the dynamics and trends that shape an exciting and powerful built environment. This is your host, Jack Osa. In today's episode of The Power of Design, I'm talking to Tim Gustafson. Tim is an executive leadership coach with a lot of experience in the commercial real estate, design, and construction industry. With more than 30 years of experience leading and coaching teams, Tim has developed a natural skill to help develop effective leaders by bringing out the best in people. During our conversation, we talk about self-awareness, authenticity, and the journey to start your own business. This is my conversation with Tim. Tim, welcome to the Power of Design podcast. How are you today?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Jack.
Tim, you help organizations develop effective leaders by bringing out the best in people. What do you think is the most common weakness of business leaders today?
So I think the most common weakness of leaders is self-awareness. I think so much of our leadership comes from how we are perceived by others and whether we recognize how we're perceived. And that self-awareness trails or tracks right to that. So if they are self-aware, then they can be a great leader. If they're not, wow, it can be a huge detriment in so many different ways. And big part of it is communication. We don't know how we're coming across if we don't have the awareness of how we're being perceived. And so that can really slow things down for how a leader connects to their people, and how he or she is able to show empathy, direct, delegate, interact, etc. So those are, I think, a lot of the implications of not being self-aware. It really can slow things down for the leader.
And why do you think we have that void, that self-awareness is not that common?
Well, it's not something we focus on. We're so focused on the task, getting it done, and we're amazing at it.
Yeah.
If you think about the production that we are able to have as individuals, the task is what we're so good at technically and so forth. But when you move into a role of a leader, it's not so much about the task. You also have to take into account then the people.
Yeah.
You have to work through people to get stuff done. Otherwise, you can't scale it. If you're the only one doing it, you're limited by your time. But if you have other people working for you, now you have to interact with them. You have to get the task done still, but you have to do it through people. So you have to balance the tasks with the people interaction and the relating to the people. So those two have to be some kind of balance. And, typically, at least in the design world, we're engineers, we're architects, we're scientists, and we're really good at understanding and solving problems that are technical in nature, not necessarily people problems.
Yeah,
which is
and it's interesting because we like problems that are outside of ourselves.
Yes.
Because we have a lot of internal problems, but we just choose not to address those.
Yeah, we all have baggage, no doubt.
Yeah.
Bag of rocks we carry around with us.
That's right. Tim, tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up east side of Cleveland in Ohio, and went to school in Miami of Ohio, Southern Ohio, and Eastern Kentucky. And I've sort of moved around a little bit throughout my career. I've got a varied career. I've got a couple degrees in geology and was in environmental consulting for quite a while.
Interesting.
Yeah, I did groundwater modeling, and but mainly, I was focused on people. So we early on, I had a group of about 12 people that I was managing, and we built a small business within the business, and so grew fast from a people leadership perspective, which has always been my strength. And so I was in the environmental consulting business for about 15 years. And I thought, at that point, there's more to life than just the environmental consulting for me, more than just the geology and, solving people's groundwater problems and so forth. But so I got involved in managing PMOs in the technical world, technology world. So I worked at Capital One and in finance and collections, and managed a large program and managed people who managed projects. And So I was with Capital One for about 7 years, and then I got the opportunity to go to Georgetown University and get my executive leadership coaching certification. And Capital One was kind enough to sponsor me in that. And that was an amazing experience. The first time I coached somebody, I knew that this was my thing.
Nice.
So then I left Capital One, got a package from them, and I came down to Charlotte, working for Wachovia.
Okay.
In their corporate properties group, or CRE at the time, I guess. Wells took us over, changed to corporate properties, and I then managed the construction and the projects for the Carolinas and Mid-Atlantic. So all the buildings and retail stores and upfits and high-rise builds and that kind of stuff were under my purview of 30 project managers we had at one point, and doing a lot of construction, a lot of work. Did the changeover from Wachovia to Wells.
Yeah,
that was quite a fun experience. And but then 5 years ago, I said I thought it was time that I do my own practice and get going in coaching. So I resigned from Wells and started applied leadership coaching, and I haven't looked back. It's been a fantastic.
That's awesome. Tell me about the time since you made the decision to go out on your own until you actually did it.
Oh, wow. Well, so I went to Georgetown in 2006.
Yes.
And at that time, I started a little business, and I thought, okay, but I wasn't ready emotionally. I didn't have the contacts. I don't know that I had the gumption to do it, because I knew it's a big deal to go out on your own, as you know. So I had to have a couple of things in place and figured out. And so I coached the whole time from 2006 to 2015. So off the side, I coached while I was at Wells and Wachovia, but nothing, of huge significance. And then, I thought it's time. So I put a business plan together and had a bunch of people look at it, and they ripped it to shreds. And I looked at it and I thought, this is it. I can do all this. So anyway, it was jumped in, and it's been off and running since.
Yeah, that's interesting. So. I always wanted to have my own business since I came from Colombia, many years ago. And one of the things that happened to me is that, I got into, the workforce, and I'm excited, and I'm kind of achieving my dreams and pursuing my goals and working at all new firms, getting new experiences, until you get to the point where I really felt that I had everything I wanted, right? And as an immigrant, I was like, well, I made it. Yeah, I got it. But I still had a little bit of that thinking about starting my own business, right? And I was working, I was very happy, nice projects, making decent money, providing for my family, but I was not happy. And I felt many times that I was ungrateful, because I was like, how come I'm not happy? I have what I wanted. What happened? And I kept thinking, and I will go, when I will pray, and I will feel like this void in my heart. I was like, man, why do I feel this way? And I try to ignore that. And that's why I asked you about the time. How long did it take you? Because it took me about a couple of years to have that internal conversation, because I was ignoring it, but it was keep growing. It was like this baby growing. And it was growing and growing and growing until it got so big that I just couldn't ignore it anymore. And, I had a lot of conversations with my wife, and my wife has always been, my biggest influencer. And she was like, yes, you can do it right now. You do it. She's always very encouraging. And once she was fully on board, and I kind of felt like, okay, that's it. I felt like, it was just like flip the switch. I felt it one way, okay, this is ready. I feel, at least emotionally, I'm ready, and I will go back to work, some days before I resign, and I will feel like I will look at myself and everybody else, and I was like, I know my body's here, but I'm not here. Right? I don't belong here anymore.
Going through the motions.
Yes, yeah. I need to do it. And once I did it, that was about 3.5 years ago, and it's been amazing. One of the best decisions I ever made in my life.
And the possibilities that it opens up are tremendous.
Oh my.
Creativity, you're not constrained by other people's desires or what they want you to do. You're your own boss in a way, and you've got to make it happen. And
Yes.
And that's been an exciting thing for me. I mean, I think when at Wells and in other locations, I was able to be creative in what you could arguably say are reactive environments, very, risk averse and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But wow, when I got out and I started thinking, it's whatever I want to make it.
Yes.
And what a fun thing that's been for me is just to be able to connect with the people that I want to connect with and really enjoy helping them be better. And that's the whole goal of coaching, is to help people improve and to be better than they were.
Yeah. And I think we are very privileged in terms of having the opportunity to do this. There are many people who live in conditions or, societies or even countries where that's not even an option.
Right.
You just have to work for somebody else forever because it's really hard to do it on your own. But here, everybody has that opportunity.
Yeah, but a lot of people don't necessarily have the desire,
Mm-hmm.
or there might be a lot of things holding them back. I mean, it takes a lot to run a business, as you know. It's let alone the piece that you enjoy, the architecture or the podcasting or whatever the connections are that you're making. That's so much fun. But then you have the whole business side of it and the nuts and bolts. And that, for me, that isn't all that much fun, but you got to do it. And it's all part of it. So.
That's right. So how do you coach yourself? Where do you go to learn, grow? And, because I believe you need to be growing at a probably faster rate than your clients.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. And there are times when clients are moving ahead and I've got to, figure out where they're going. What do they have happening? For sure. So, so I think I have a coach and, that's something they got to sort of walk the talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so the coaching is about the internal work. It's the inner working of what's going on, what's in my head, what's holding me back. What are the fears that I've got? What are the challenges that I'm facing that I'm not dealing with? And so, my coach helps me through those things. And that's super important to have that third party look at the world to help me see things that I am not necessarily seeing.
Yes.
And so that's been a huge growth component for me. And I started that about a year after I started full-time coaching. I was able to connect with a gal that she's just amazing, just fabulous. So that's been really good. And then of course there's a lot of reading, being that my focus is really around leadership. Read a lot of books, podcasts in the coaching world. There's all sorts of webinars and podcasts that they have to bring up various approaches and ideas. And so, that continues to be a place of focus for me all along. But the biggest thing that I think is so important in coaching is the presence. As a coach, I have to be totally present with my clients, regardless where they go, or I have to be there with them. And I got to stay out of my head and out of my thoughts and issues. I got to be with them. And then as the questions pop up, I've got to be available to hear and feel that question and put it right back to them. Sometimes it's a soft question. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's very challenging and it stops them in their tracks. But that's why I'm there, is to help them to see the things that they don't see.
Yes.
And so I just have to be aware of where they are and where they're not, and just ask them the questions.
Sure. Who are typically your clients? What type of business and, age, what type of person?
That's a great question. So huge variety for sure. Let me tackle the age one first. Yeah. So I coached a 17-year-old, and she was far advanced from many of the adults that I have coached. She was ready and alert and aware and present and knew what she wanted. And it was an amazing experience. And that was probably 5 years ago. And she's completed college and she's off and working in the world and doing great. Um, I think probably the oldest person I've probably coached is in mid-60s, and everything in between. Typical, it's 30, 40-year-olds, maybe early 50s is probably the mainstay. My clients are CEOs, they're owners, mid-level business managers, CE types, whether it be CFO or CTO or whatever. And then the businesses, of course, my network is really in the construction world, coming from Wells. But that's not exclusively where I connect. So all the auxiliary type construction firms, now GCs, architects, engineers, but then flooring and furniture manufacturer and, and so forth. So all the others that are adjacent to that, the subcontractors essentially.
What's particular about that industry?
The construction world,
construction, design, real estate. You spend a lot of time in there.
Yeah.
What do you see in there that you don't see in any other industries?
So the networking that is going on is, it's so much of it is based on networking in real estate and who you know, how you connect, how you get the jobs and so forth. The technical aspects, probably aren't that much different. Manufacturing, chemical, you're producing something, and that production piece is similar in nature, that there's a flow to it. It's got to be accurate, technically correct, all those kinds of things. But really the focus of the management, there isn't a lot of difference. CEOs are CEOs, whether they're in furniture or whether they're in auto manufacturing or auto sales or whatever. They still have to deal with the same things. They still have bottom line. They still have people to deal with. They got assets that they got to manage and understand and sell off or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's some things that are different, but there's probably a lot more similarities, at least from my perspective in the coaching world, that I deal with. So there are, some very consistent issues that are out there. And you opened up with a question about, what's the biggest challenge? And
yes,
those, the list goes on and on. There's many things that individuals face that are similar.
Yeah. Walk me through a typical framework that you use with your clients since they engage you until, your job finished with them.
Okay. So can I ask you a question first?
Yeah.
So because, and it sort of leads into the answer for your question. So what is the purpose of design from your perspective? What are some things that come to mind when I would ask you that question?
To me, the purpose of design is to enhance our experience of life.
Okay.
So we're living life. We're here. So design is where you want to make that better, right? So you can make it better many different ways. So when you start thinking about that end result, let's say architectural design, we said, we should probably have a place we can put a lot of people in there so they can have what they need.
Yeah.
Okay, what do we need? Then you start the design process. You have a big ideas. You start sketching. You start solving, asking people, understanding that future, and you start creating that future that you imagine to make life better. And the design process, it's all the steps that take you there.
Yeah.
Starting from a very artistic or abstract desire of an outcome to the very detailed, constructability, bolt, money, everything that takes to get there. So that's what I think about design.
And so there's a lot to consider: environment and the purpose, objectives, the flow that you need in how you put it together and so forth. And so to go back to your question, I think it's a very similar kind of thing that needs to be taken into account when I do my coaching, because it's all about improvement, just like design is.
Yeah.
And so this idea of improvement for individuals is not really that different. So we want to be intentional about what we do ultimately. So we've got to understand where we're at. Well, sometimes people don't really know. So we might do a 360 assessment and get feedback from other people. Like you were saying, you get information. And so for a leader to get feedback from those that are direct reports, peers to the side, their managers or leaders or stakeholders, however that is, if they're a CEO, board members, whatever, get the feedback so that they know where they stand. And then they also provide their input where they think they stand. So these gaps show up in how others perceive me and how I perceive myself. And sometimes these gaps are like a punch in the gut. It just, people get pretty angry about some of the results. I know who said that. I know, and which doesn't really matter. But the idea is that you have this gift of information that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise. And so now you have an opportunity to understand better how you're being perceived and what I can do now differently if I want to, if I desire to change in this space. One thing I often bring up is, many times people think they have super high integrity, and yet people's assessments show that their integrity isn't that high, at least how they perceive it. And that bothers people. Well, so how are you showing up? Where is that coming from? So we do a little investigation and evaluate what's that about. But it's always the client's agenda. The clients are the ones that need to drive it because they have to be willing to do the work. And being coached is not easy work. You're going deep. And these are areas that we haven't explored. To your point earlier on, we usually do the outside work, and we're great at that. This inside work, sometimes a little bit scary. So I help guide people through that and develop the trust with them in the process so that they trust me that I can take them to those places where they need to go. And we work it, and we come up with ideas and solutions, and then we experiment. We try different things, different behaviors, because it's all about behavior. It's all about how we behave. So we change our behavior, and we experiment. How does that feel? It's usually pretty awkward because we haven't done it before. We're letting go of a behavior we don't want sometimes, and we're moving into a behavior that we want to have. And so that opportunity back and forth doesn't happen overnight. If you think about it, we've been doing some of these behaviors now for 30 years or 40 years, 50 years, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we're pretty good at it. And so the neural pathways in our brain have sort of created a path, this neural pathway that is pretty hardened. And, not that we can't change, but wow, if we start to go away from it, it's so easy to go back to it. Those default behaviors, if you will. So we try to get this process so that, I can see this way. I like this way. It's good. It's good. It's good. But we still have that default behavior. It stays there a long time. And so sometimes we go back to it. So anyway, it's a process. It takes time. Just a sort of an offshoot from this thought, this neural pathways. Mm-hmm. So last year, I sort of revived my biking. I'm a road cyclist. And my son challenged me to get back on the bike and do a big ride with him and so forth. And so I did that. I bought a bike and started going. And after a couple of weeks, I'd been riding. And it's been 30 years since I did significant riding. And I'd do some big rides. I'd do 50, 60, 100 milers and so forth. I'm pretty competitive with it. So I was going at it. I was going up a hill here. This was last year. And I was getting tired. And so, nowadays, all the gears on the bikes are all up on the handlebars up top. Mm-hmm. Back in the day when I was riding, the shifting gears were down on the down tube. So I had to reach down to change them. You remember that?
Yeah.
So I started going up this hill, and I was getting tired. And I'd been working on the bike for a couple of weeks. And what did I do? I went right down to the down tube to change. Wow. And the gear wasn't there. That was 30 years ago.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy? So the neural pathway was still there. And that was my default behavior still at that point. So, just a funny little example, but that's the way it is with us all the time. we have a certain way of doing it, and we always want to go back to it until we change, until we see this new way of doing it. And it takes time to get there. So anyway, that's what coaching is, really.
We'll be right back with more from the Power of Design podcast.
The Power of Design podcast is brought to you by OSA Studio, a multidisciplinary design firm focused on creating impactful experiences through the power of design. We partner with our clients to create buildings, interior spaces, brands, and strategies that help you deliver a successful project. As a minority-owned firm, we are committed to building a diverse platform of curious and driven design professionals so we can together pursue our full potential. For more information, please visit us at www.osastudio.com.
Is it the same process to, let's say, forgive or get rid of all neural pathways that we know that they don't serve us anymore? Is it the same process to create new ones that now they're gonna work for us?
Yeah, so new ones, we have to figure out what that is. And once we do it, there's a way that the brain works. It makes new connections and a new path. And it's got to get well worn before we can really start, and think about driving. When we first started driving, we were pretty intense about it, focused. And now when you go driving, you're going down the freeway and you think for five minutes, what just happened?
You don't remember.
How did I get here? Yeah. We become so good at it, we don't even have to think about it. So it takes a little time. Now, how much the time is, I think it really depends on how much we use it, how active we are, how intense it is for us. That intensity really helps to align things. So when we're really focused on doing something, I believe that these neural pathways sort of get connected a little bit quicker, and a little bit harder, and more, not forceful isn't quite the right word, but so, yeah, I think it really depends upon the situation, but we do have to practice it in order to get good at it. And coaching is about practicing. It's about doing it over and over again, and feedback, and how do I want to tweak it? What's working? What's not working? And some of that might even be feedback from your associates, or those you're working with. How did that feel? Oh, that wasn't quite right. All right, help me out. Get feedback. Continual loop of process change. Yeah.
How broad is the range of your approach? Since I will think that people approach you for a certain need that they have, but I'm sure that during the process they're gonna start uncovering more things. Absolutely. And maybe at any other areas of their life.
Yes,
because we're one whole human being, and we have all these areas, and all those things may come up. And I'm sure that if you know that you have to address that first, that's what you need to fix it. How does that work?
So I think for me, it's fluid. It's seamless, if you will, because we are one person. And that is exactly how I look at it, Jack, just the way you described it. This isn't just about business. Yeah, that's an aspect of it, but so is community. Yeah. So is our family. So is our social interactions. Our spiritual, all that is combined. And so it all plays with us in how we go about our life. And, I use the phrase, we want to be the same here, there, and everywhere. Because we're one human being. You don't want to be one person at work and then go home and be a totally different person, and then, go out socially and be completely different. It gets pretty exhausting living three different lives or different lives. So goes down to the values. What are the things that are important for you? And we talked earlier on about priorities and intention. And that's what it goes down to. What are those goals? What's the intentions that you want to create in your life, and be intentional and purposeful about how you go about things? Because we can't focus on everything.
Yeah.
So one thing at a time. And in coaching, we work on one big thing. One thing at a time. We work through that. Once we get that sort of in a good place, then the other things, as you work on one intensely, the other things start to improve as well, just off to the side. It's just part of the process. And then we switch over to something else that's also important and continue the process.
Yeah. In the branding world, we say that you cannot read the label when you're inside the bottle. So in terms of your work, I know people want to be congruent with who people think they are and who they think they are. So I will think that should be pretty close. But I will say that it's impossible because, we're in our own head, and all we know is this projection of life in front of us, and we have no idea what others are thinking, right? So what's success for you in terms of your client? Like that those two realities match, or they don't really have to match, but I'm good with having the other reality?
Yeah,
I don't know if my question makes sense.
It's a great question, actually. So I think ultimately it's for somebody to be authentic and true to themselves. Because when they are authentic and true to themselves, then the rest of the world sees it and the alignment occurs. So it's not so important to have that alignment, although it's really important to understand the gaps in the alignment.
Yeah.
But that just helps you to understand yourself better. Because if you're misperceiving yourself and how you project and you want to do something differently, then you do the deep dive and you figure out what it is that I really want and who I want to become. And then you focus on becoming that person. And as you become that person, then all the other stuff works out. And people then recognize, oh, they are real. That is the truth for them. That's their reality. I get it and I like it. I'm there.
Yeah.
Or not. But if you're true to yourself and that's what you want, bingo, that's success.
Why do we care so much about what others think about us?
Wow, that's a good question, isn't it? Yeah, that's a really good question. And the world is made up of opinions, and I think in large part the media, the world, they want us to believe that those opinions are true. And that they're facts. And they're not. It's just an opinion. It's neither true nor false. It's just an opinion. And so, but if we believe in our minds that whatever somebody else thinks is true, wow, that can destroy us. And if you think about the people that have, some mental illness or sicknesses and so forth, and it's based upon what other people think, like, I'm too thin, or I'm too fat. I mean, I have too much weight. And you look at the models and, they're thin and they look great. And I need to look like them more and more. And then they start believing that is the truth for them. And it's comparing to something else that isn't their reality. And it's actually not reality at all. It's just a picture, potentially photoshopped. But that becomes what they think they should be, this comparison. And is that really what they want? Is that who they're made up of? But it's probably not, but it's based on this perception of something that they're comparing to. And so much of the world out there is pushing these, realities, whatever they think it is, their opinions. And it's dangerous because it really needs to be about us. And blocking out that distraction is really important so that we can hear and understand what it is we need to be. Yeah.
It seems that we are all like desperate to find our identity, like by having something that validates who we are, right? And it's so easy to look for that out of ourselves, and especially with, TV, social media, other people's opinions. They're like, oh, if they value that, then that might be right. And then that's what I'm going to value. And I think part of the problem might be that we attach our identity to things that they have no identity or meaning. For example, sometimes when people fail, let's say I fail at something, people say, I'm a failure. Like they identify with something that has nothing to do with themselves. You did something that didn't work, so you failed. You have failed, but you're not a failure. But once we say I'm a failure, well, guess what? I'm gonna be a failure. I'm gonna think like that because I identified with that, or oh, I am fat. You're not fat. You have, like extra body weight. You have that, but you're not that. And once you say we are something, our mind and our heart is going to attach to it immediately.
Yeah. Oh, so true. The identity that we put on things. I'm not good enough. I'm not fast enough. I'm not smart enough. I can't add up to that. Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that identity is, it's so important to understand what our values are and where we actually place importance and intentions and purpose in our lives. And that's really the basis of this coaching, is we want people to get there. And when they are there, the other things work out much more rapidly and easily than maybe they've experienced in the past. And, one of the things that we have beliefs, not necessarily right or wrong, but they're true for us. And sometimes those beliefs hold us back. And it ties to these identity things that, I'm not good enough, or I'm not the smartest person in the room, and I need to be. Why? But these belief systems that hold us back sometimes are a significant challenge because we don't recognize them. We don't see what's holding us back. So we call them limiting beliefs. And great question that I ask often with my clients is, what are your limiting beliefs? What do you mean? What are the things that are holding you back that you believe to be true about yourself? And boy, that can really open up some eyes. It brings revelations for people and inspiration around, wow, I never thought about it that way, but yeah, this is holding me back and I don't need to think that way. Okay, then let's think about something differently. So yeah, that limiting beliefs align with these identity challenges that we sometimes have. And, from my view, I don't bring judgment to this situation. It's not my place to judge. It's only the person that I'm coaching. It's their judgment. Bring it to their face to make the decision and see the reality or see the challenge that might be before them. But that's identity is so important as part of this process.
Yeah. I'm sure there are many like basic human, behaviors and standards and values that they're just intrinsic of any human being that could be coached 100 years ago or 100 years later. But a part of that, what do you think are the main key characteristics that the leader of the future should have?
That's a great question. And I'm going to pose it in a couple of different ways, but at least understanding it from the perspective of stages of adult development. So as we grow as adults, we want to continue. The whole idea is that we continue to progress and grow. And so, we start out pretty egotistical, where it's all about us and it's about I and me, and my identity is around my car, my house, and, things that we talked about, maybe some of these more significant limiting beliefs. But that's about us. We want to move into a place as leaders where it's about we and us, a more creative place where we're working in high integrity, we're authentic, we have sustainable approach and process. There's a community concern out there that we might have. We're able to be strategic and purpose-driven. We have the whole aspect of relating to people, mentoring and developing and collaborating and caring concern. And then there's a whole interpersonal piece of this where we're sort of consummate learners, and we have seeking to be better from an interpersonal intelligence perspective. We have balance in how we approach things. So that to me is sort of the place that we want to move to. And there's maybe 20% of the leaders are in that space. Most leaders are in a reactive world where they're critical and they're protective, and they want to be autocratic, make all the decisions. They're critical of other people. They want to control things. Or they've sort of resigned themselves and they're just complying with what is being told of them, and they go implement it. So they're not utilizing the creative aspect that you and I both relate to from a design perspective. So I think it's that. I think there's a whole, I call it sort of a love kind of thing. There's a fear-based, which is this reactive work that and challenges that we might have, tendencies, if you will. And then there's this love-based scheme, which is the creative world. And that leads to me into more of the servant leadership kind of approach, where it's charity, it's connecting with other people, and it's sort of the greater good is part of the process. But like everything else, it's hard work, takes time to get there, for sure. Some people are gifted with those kind of perspectives and thought processes, but others have to work at it. But these are behaviors. Behaviors can change. We can improve. We can develop. It's not personality-based. It's behavioral-based. And it's about how we can move and progress. And we learn these things, just like those neural pathways. Yeah. We can let go and we can move forward. So those are all good things to consider and ways to be.
I think you're still the same person who studied geology. You just switch rocks for brains.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Interesting. Tim, tell me, how does the power of design impact who you are and what you do?
Well, for me, it's all about improvement, and design's about improvement and growing and making things better. And I love the architectural world and the process that architects and engineers go through to solve problems. I apply that same principle to how I work with people. For me, it's all about their success. It's not my success. I enjoy and love participating and being allowed into someone's life, that they would trust me to be part of their life to help them progress and grow. And so I add my element of creativity and design into their world through my questions and how I ask the questions and the questions that come forward as we experience their lives and their challenges and issues. So to me, the power of design is phenomenal when it comes to people and how people grow and progress. Like buildings are becoming more and more fluid, it's not necessarily just about a stationary structure with a stationary desk. There's a lot more fluidity to it. And I think it's a similar kind of thing that when I work with people. It's fluid. And we want to keep it fluid because the world is ever changing, and the dynamic of a human being has to be able to move with the change. So much of it is about change these days, as that's probably a worn out phrase in the last, 2 months. Everything is changing. And so we as leaders need to be able to step up into that. And the only way we can do that is to be more creative, to scale ourselves so that we can teach and help others to grow and to learn. And we have to share in order to get others on board, because we can't do this ourselves. One individual just can't handle it. We have to have more brains in the room. And what is the phrase? One of us is not as smart as all of us. So important going forward. We're going to have to work together with the challenges that are out there, whether it be all the racial tensions that we are experiencing now, or whether it be the COVID approach and how we're coming back into the world and what's the new world going to look like. We have no idea. But with all of us working together and sharing, we have a chance to make it happen.
Tim, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here and sharing your knowledge and your talents. I'm very happy to have this opportunity, and I look forward to stay in touch.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jack. It's been a pleasure to be with you. You're an inspiration for me and for many people in Charlotte here with the power of design that you've got.
Thanks. Thank you for listening to the Power of Design podcast. Remember to rate and review on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Find out more about Jack and OSA Studio at osastudio.com and follow us on Instagram at the Power of Design podcast. Thank you.